It's 9:40 p.m., October 29th. I'm alone in a locked cabin 9 miles deep in the Appalachians, and I've just put the last memory card of the season into the reader. Photo 291 is on my screen right now. It was taken at 3:11 this morning by a trail camera bolted to a tree on a ridge I didn't reach until this afternoon. It's a picture of me, standing 6 feet from the lens, in the dark, smiling. At 3:11 this morning, I was asleep in this building. I'm on my own security cameras all night. I've checked 4 times. But there I am on that ridge, in my jacket, in my boots, centered in the frame like a portrait. And the smile is wrong. The face is mine, and the smile is not mine. And I can't teach you the difference in words, but you would know it instantly, the way you'd know a recording of your own voice pitched 2% wrong. My hand is on the mouse. There are 20 more photos on this card after this one. The next one has 3 people in it. Okay. I'm not going to show you that photo yet, because without the last 8 months, it's just a creepy picture. And it is not just a creepy picture. It's the last move in a game something had been playing with me since March, camera by camera, card by card. So I'm going to back all the way up, and I'm going to take you through it the way it came to me. 6 things, in order. And when we get back to this desk and this card and the 20 photos under my cursor, you'll understand why I left before sunrise and never went back. First, the ground rules. I'm not going to tell you the real name of the forest. No coordinates, no trail names, no university. Some of you will think that's convenient. 2 years ago, I'd have thought the same. But the cameras are still out there, 41 of them last I knew. Nobody ever went back for the rest. And if I tell you where they are, someone watching this will go looking. And everything I'm about to describe happened in daylight-safe, well-mapped, federally managed forest, the kind of place families hike on weekends. It never felt wrong. That's the part that still gets me. It never felt wrong. The pictures just kept coming back wrong. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that from March to November 2 years ago, I was a field research technician on a wildlife population study in the Central Appalachians. My job title was Camera Grid Coordinator, which is a fancy way of saying I hiked to remote trail cameras, swapped their SD cards and batteries, and hauled the data back to a field station to be sorted. It is, I promise you, the most boring job in the world. 99% of trail camera photos are nothing. A branch moving, a deer's back leg, 400 consecutive pictures of the same raccoon. It's the other 1% I'm here to talk about. There were 6 things. 6 over 8 months that I have never been able to explain. I've had 2 years to come up with rational answers, and believe me, I've tried. Camera malfunction, pranks, poachers, sleep deprivation. I'll give you the rational explanation for each one where it exists, and you can decide for yourself where the line is. But you already know where this ends. It ends at a desk at 9:40 p.m. with my own smile looking back at me and my hand on the mouse. The question isn't what was in the forest. It's what the forest wanted with me. Some background first, because the details matter. The study was a black bear and elk population survey covering about 60 square miles of ridge and hollow country. If you've never been to the Appalachians, the thing you have to understand is that the terrain lies. On a map, 2 cameras might be a mile apart. On foot, that mile is a 40-minute climb down a drainage full of rhododendron so thick you crawl through it, a creek crossing, and a climb back up the other side. GPS cuts out under the canopy. Radios cut out in the hollows. Cell service is a rumor. The grid had 64 cameras when I started. Standard commercial trail cams, infrared flash, motion triggered, strapped to trees about waist height, each one in a locked steel security box bolted through the tree. That last part is important. Remember the boxes. They matter later. Each camera got visited once every 2 weeks on a rotating schedule. I'd hike a loop of 8 to 10 cameras a day, swap cards, check batteries, note anything unusual on a paper data sheet, and hike out. Most nights I drove back to the field station, a converted hunting cabin with a generator, a satellite internet dish that worked when it felt like it, and a wall of hard drives. Some loops were too deep to do in a day, so 2 or 3 nights a week I camped alone at designated backcountry sites. I want to be honest about who I was when this started, because it's relevant. I wasn't a believer in anything. I was 26, I had a wildlife biology degree, and I had spent my whole life being the guy who ruins ghost stories. Every weird photo has an explanation. Moths on the lens look like orbs. Slow shutter speeds turn dogs into monsters. Coyotes with mange are your dog men. I'd seen thousands of unexplainable trail cam photos online, and I could debunk every single one from my couch. I'm telling you this so you understand the order these things happened in matters. Because each one, on its own, I explained away. I filed it, I made a joke about it in my field notes, and I moved on. It's only when you line all 6 up in a row that you see it. It wasn't 6 random events. It was a sequence. It was something getting closer. Number 1. The elk. This was late April, about 6 weeks into the season. Camera 17 sat on a bench of flat ground below a ridgeline, watching a natural travel corridor where 3 game trails braided together. It was one of our best cameras, bear, elk, bobcat, a river otter that had no business being up that high. 17 saw everything. Pulling its guard was the highlight of the loop. That week, 17 had captured 1,214 images. That's a big number, but not a crazy one for a camera on a corridor. I didn't sort cards in the field, too much to do, so it wasn't until 2 nights later back at the station that I actually opened the folder. The first 300 photos were normal. Deer, deer, turkey, deer, a coyote, more deer. Then, at 11:42 p.m. on the second night, a bull elk walks into frame from the left. Big animal, 5x5 antlers, maybe 700 pounds. He stops in the middle of the frame, broadside to the camera, head turned toward the lens. Elk do that. The infrared flash isn't visible light, but the camera makes a tiny mechanical click, and their hearing is unbelievable. You get thousands of photos of animals staring at the camera, totally normal. The next photo, 30 seconds later, he hasn't moved. Fine. The next one hasn't moved. The next 40 photos hasn't moved. Now, here's the thing about that. The camera only fires when its motion sensor trips. A standing animal that's genuinely still won't keep triggering it. But he did. Every 30 to 90 seconds all night, the sensor fired, which means he was moving, just not in any way I could see between frames. Breathing, ear flicks, whatever. Fine. Except, I started scrubbing through the photos like a flip book, and that's when I noticed the head. Frame by frame, over about 4 hours, his head rotates, slowly, smoothly, tracking from facing the camera to facing away from it. Not looking around the way a browsing animal does, not down to feed, not back over his shoulder at a sound. One continuous turn, a degree or 2 per frame, like the second hand of a clock. 4 hours to turn his head 120 degrees. At 3:58 a.m., his head finishes the turn. He is now facing directly away from the camera, staring up the slope toward the ridgeline. And he holds that for 5 more hours, through sunrise. The photos shift from infrared black and white to color as the light comes up, and he's still there, statue still, staring uphill. A 700-pound prey animal standing in the open, in one spot, for over 9 hours. Elk don't do that. Nothing does that. Standing still that long is how you die in the wild. Every instinct that animal has is screaming at it to feed, to move, to bed down under cover. And I want to be clear about what the photos didn't show. No injury, no limp when he finally moved. Nothing in the frame with him. I checked every photo at full resolution. The tree line behind him, the shadows between the trunks, every gap in the brush. There was nothing there. At 9:16 a.m., photo 1090, I still remember the file number. He's gone. One frame, he's there, and 31 seconds later, at the next trigger, the frame is empty. And whatever the camera detected to fire that last shot isn't in it. Okay, rational explanations. I had 3. 1. The elk was sick. Chronic wasting disease and brainworm both cause stupor and abnormal behavior in cervids. That was my leading theory, and honestly, it's a decent one. 2. Something was up on that ridge, a predator, a person, and he was fixated on it. Also plausible. 3. Some weird sensor fault was over-triggering the camera, and I was reading a pattern into noise. Any of those would have let me sleep fine. I logged it as possible CWD candidate, flag for biologist, and I moved on. I even showed the sequence to Dana, the project's lead biologist, on her next visit to the station. She scrubbed through it twice, frowned, and said the thing that I didn't fully hear at the time, but have thought about every day since. It's not the standing that bothers me. Sick animals stand. It's the turn. He's not watching the ridge. Look at the ears. The ears never orient uphill. He turned his head away from the camera, but his ears stay on it the whole night. I pulled the sequence back up that night, and she was right. 9 hours. Body pointed uphill, ears pinned back toward the lens. Toward me, or toward where I'd stood 2 days earlier, swapping that card. Here's the detail I didn't tell Dana, because I didn't clock it myself until much later when I had reason to go back through everything. That bench below the ridge is quiet ground. Wind dies there, and in 11 of the photos from the deepest part of the night, between roughly 2 and 3 a.m., is a small bright smudge low in the right corner of the frame. I'd written it off as a moth catching the infrared flash. Moths ruin trail cam photos constantly. It's the first thing a skeptic like me reaches for. But moths flit. They're in one frame and go on the next, a different smear every time. This smudge is in 11 consecutive frames. Same size, same corner, same height off the ground, about 4 feet. And in the last of the 11 frames, it's not a smudge anymore. It's resolved, just slightly, into a shape. 2 points, side by side, about 4 inches apart. Round. Bright, the way eyes are bright in infrared. Something small, or something crouched down low, sat at the edge of that frame for 11 frames, 4 feet from the camera, watching the elk watch the ridge. Or it was a moth. That's what I said out loud, alone in the station at 1 in the morning, with the hard drives humming behind me. It's a moth. File it. Next folder. And I want you to notice what I did there, because it's the theme of this whole story. I had a photo of a 9-hour vigil, a biologist telling me the animal's ears were locked on the camera, and 2 bright points hanging 4 feet off the ground at the edge of frame. And the story I chose to tell myself was sick elk plus a moth. We are so good at that. It's not stupidity, it's maintenance. Your brain quietly triages everything you see into matters and doesn't matter. Because if everything mattered, you couldn't function. The forest, or whatever was in it, seemed to understand that about people. Everything it did for months stayed just barely on the doesn't matter side of the line. The elk showed up on 2 more cameras that spring. Camera 22 in mid-May, feeding, normal. Camera 9 in early June, moving through with 2 cows, normal. I know it was him because of a broken brow tine on the left side. Perfectly healthy animal as far as any photo could tell. No wasting, no stupor. Whatever happened on that bench in April, it wasn't a disease. After June, no camera in the grid ever photographed him again. Number 2. The hikers. This is the one that made the local news, sort of, and it's the reason I can't ever fully bury this story, because pieces of it exist outside my head. Second week of June. Camera 31 sat on an old logging grade on the northeast edge of the grid, a wide, flat cut through the forest that hadn't seen a vehicle since the 70s but made a perfect wildlife highway. Bears used it like a sidewalk. When I pulled 31's card, the datasheet note I wrote was, and I quote, "Quiet card, low count, check sensor. 206 photos in 2 weeks, basically nothing. Photo 140, 2:51 p.m. on a Tuesday. Full color, broad daylight. 2 hikers walking up the logging grade toward the camera, a man and a woman, mid-20s maybe. External frame backpacks, the big aluminum ladder-looking kind. He's got a red flannel tied around his waist and a bandana. She's in a windbreaker, the kind with the huge geometric color panels, teal and purple. Wool socks over the boots. My first reaction was, retro. People do that now. Y2K trail fashion, film cameras, the whole aesthetic. I even thought, good for them, those external frames are miserable. Photo 141, the closer. 142, closer. Nice, clear, sharp images. In 143, the man is looking directly into the camera. Not at the tree, at the lens, dead center. And he's smiling. Not a, hey, a trail cam smirk. A photo smile, posed. The way you smile when someone you love says, hold still. Photo 144. They're gone. The grade is empty. The timestamp says 2:53 p.m. and the light is wrong. 143 is bright afternoon. 144, 60 seconds later by the clock, is dim, blue, almost dusk. The next photo after that is a doe at 7:40 p.m., and the light matches dusk perfectly. So, camera glitch, clock hiccup, exposure error, whatever. Cameras are cheap electronics living outside in the rain. I noted possible clock fault and moved on. You see the pattern by now. There's always a note. There's always a folder to put it in. Except this time I did something extra, and I honestly don't know why. The hikers were photogenic. The images were crisp. The project had a public outreach account where we posted fun captures, bear cubs, bobcats, the otter. I cropped photo 143, the smiling one, and sent it to Dana with a joke. 1994 cold, wants its gear back. She posted it that Friday with a caption like, "Even hikers trip our cameras. Nice kit, you two. Tag yourselves." It had about 40 comments by Sunday night. 38 of them were normal. 2 of them were not. The first was from a woman asking, with what I can only describe as very careful punctuation, where exactly this photo was taken and when. The second was from a man who didn't ask anything. He just wrote a name, a first and last name, and then, "That's my sister." I'm going to compress the next 3 weeks because it involved the county sheriff, a state police cold case unit, and 2 families, and those people deserve their privacy. But the core of it is this. In August of 1987, a young couple parked at a trailhead about 9 miles from camera 31 and set off on a 4-day loop. They were reported overdue that Labor Day weekend. The search lasted 3 weeks and found a single item, a bandana snagged in laurel above a creek 6 miles from their car. Neither of them was ever seen again. Their families provided photographs to investigators in 1987. The photographs still exist in the case file. I've seen 2 of them because a state police detective laid them on the field station table next to my monitor, side by side with photo 143, and asked me very quietly if this was some kind of joke. The red flannel, the teal and purple windbreaker, the external frames, the bandana, the same bandana the one the searchers found, which had spent 39 years in an evidence box, and which was also, somehow, around the neck of the man in my photo, taken by a camera I had personally bolted to a tree, time-stamped 14 days before I pulled the card. And the faces. I want to be careful here because faces are where people fool themselves. Pareidolia, family resemblance, low resolution. But my photo wasn't low resolution. It was a sharp, well-lit, close-range daylight capture, and the detective wasn't asking me if it was a joke because the people looked similar. He was asking because they looked identical. Not aged 39 years. Identical. The same two 20-somethings who walked into that forest in 1987, walking up a logging grade in high summer daylight, smiling at my camera. The way you smile when someone you love says, "Hold still." Now, rational explanations. This one actually has a decent one, and the cold case unit ran with it because what else are you going to write in a report? Theory. Two modern hikers, true crime enthusiasts, recreated the missing couple's gear and route as some kind of tribute or stunt. People genuinely do this, and either resembled the couple or were chosen for the resemblance. The clock fault explains the light, the bandana as a replica. Case note filed, nothing further actionable. And I'd take that theory. I'd take it gladly. Except for 3 problems. Problem 1. The post went semi-viral locally. Newspapers picked it up. If 2 people staged a tribute hike that accidentally landed in a police file in the local news, someone talks. Someone always talks. Nobody ever came forward. Not then, not since. Problem 2. The route. To reach Camera 31, those hikers walked at least 4 miles from the nearest legal access point, through terrain with no maintained trail on a logging grade that appears on no modern map. It's not on the Forest Service maps, it's not on the hiking apps, it's not visible on satellite because of canopy. It was on the 1979 Topo Quad, the 1987 couple's planned loop, the one in the case file drawn in pen by the man's father for the searchers. It follows that grade. It goes right past that tree. Problem 3 is the one I never told the detective. Camera 31 shot 206 photos that cycle. When I archived the card at the end of the season and re-indexed everything, you'll understand later why I was re-indexing everything. The folder held 207. The extra photo was numbered 143B. I have never seen a trail camera generate a file name like that. There is no 143B. That's not how the firmware works. 143B is the same frame as 143. Same couple, same pose, same light. Except in B, the man isn't smiling at the camera. He's pointing at it. And the woman's mouth is open, wide. Wider than a mouth should easily go, and her head is tilted at the sky, and if you asked a stranger what she was doing in that photo, every single one of them would say the same word: laughing. The timestamp on 143B is what finally made me stop showing people things. It isn't 2:51 p.m. on that Tuesday in June. It's from October 29th, 3:11 a.m. A date that, at the time the card was in that camera, and at the time I pulled it, and at the time the detective sat in my station, hadn't happened yet. Hold on to that date, October 29th. We're coming back to it. Number 3, the cameras that turned around. July, peak summer. The forest at its loudest and greenest, and me at my most rattled, but functioning. I want to describe what functioning looked like, because if you've ever worked an isolated job, you'll recognize it. You compartmentalize. Daylight me hiked loops, swapped cards, ate lunch on rocks with nice views, and genuinely loved the work. Nighttime me, alone at the station with the drives humming, had started sorting new cards with the overhead lights on and a podcast playing, because silence had developed a texture I didn't like. But I hadn't told anyone anything. What was there to tell? A weird elk and a police matter that had an official explanation. I was fine. The third thing didn't arrive as one event. It arrived as maintenance tickets. July 9th, camera 44. I hike up to it and it's facing the wrong way. Not knocked crooked, rotated. The steel security box was still locked, still bolted through the trunk, but the whole assembly had been swiveled around the tree so the lens pointed at the bark, nose to the tree like a kid in timeout. Bears do incredible things to trail cameras. They bite them, rip them down, pop welds. A bear rotating a bolted box around a trunk without leaving a single tooth mark, claw mark, or scratch in the paint? Less standard. But steel was intact, camera worked. I re-aimed it, logged wildlife interference. Done. July 11th, 2 drainages away, camera 12, facing the tree. Same thing, no damage, no marks. July 15th, camera 38, facing the tree. 3 cameras, 3 separate hollows, 11 trail miles between the farthest 2. And here's what I couldn't file away this time: the cards. All 3 cameras had kept shooting the whole cycle, until they didn't. Each one had a normal week of wildlife, and then a final photo, and then nothing but black frames of tree bark. And on all 3 cameras, the final normal photo, the last thing each camera saw before it was turned, carried the same timestamp. July 6th, 3:11 a.m. 3 cameras, 11 miles apart, the same minute. 3:11. You've heard that time already tonight. You're going to hear it again. And those 3 final frames. I've looked at them more than I've looked at photos of my own family. Camera 44's last frame is empty forest. Except the lower right corner is soft, out of focus, the way a frame gets when something is inches from the lens, entering from behind the camera. Camera 12's last frame is empty forest, except every tree in the image is leaning 2 or 3 degrees, as if the camera was already mid-rotation when the shutter fired, which means the sensor was triggered by whatever was moving it. And camera 38's last frame isn't empty. It's a picture of camera 38. I need you to sit with that the way I had to. The final image on camera 38's card, timestamped 3:11 a.m., is a photograph of that same camera in its locked steel box on its tree, taken from about 20 feet away, from the middle of the game trail it was aimed at. Infrared, night, slightly high angle, like the photographer was tall, or holding the lens above their head. There's no second camera in our grid within 2 miles of 38. There's no EXIF data. The file's metadata fields aren't wrong, they're empty, which the manufacturer told me in a support email I still have, quote, should not be possible with files generated by this device. Something walked up to camera 38 at 3:11 in the morning, took a picture of it, somehow put that picture on it, and then turned it to face the tree, and did the same at the same minute to 2 other cameras. It could not have walked between in one night. Not on foot, not through that terrain. I've done those miles, in daylight, with trekking poles and a reason to live. It's 9 hours. Rational explanations. Believe me, I built a whole wall of them. Multiple pranksters with bolt cutters and a plan, except nothing was cut. A coordinated stunt by people who'd seen the viral hiker photo and figured out roughly where our grid was. That one held actual water, and it's what I typed into the incident report. Poachers hiding their movements would explain turned cameras, but not synchronized timestamps, and definitely not a photo with no origin. Clock drift could explain matching times, except these cameras' clocks were verified by me against my GPS every 2 weeks, and none had drifted before or since. Here's the thing about being the skeptic, the debunker, the guy who ruins ghost stories. Your entire method rests on one assumption, that the mundane explanation, however strained, is always available. Mange, moths, pranks, glitches. And the method works right up until the day the mundane explanations start requiring more coincidences than the thing they're explaining away. 3 timestamps, 11 miles, a photograph from nowhere. At some point, elaborate hoax by persons unknown, for no reason, leaving no trace, achieving nothing, isn't skepticism anymore. It's faith. I reported it as vandalism anyway. The Forest Service law enforcement officer, a genuinely good guy, I won't use his name, drove out, looked at the sights, took my statement, and agreed it was, quote, kids. Then, as he was leaving, standing by his truck with the door open, he asked me a question in a voice that was trying very hard to be casual. "These turned cameras, they out toward Sanders Bench, northeast corner, up past the old grade?" I told him yes, more or less. 44 and 38 were both out that direction. He nodded for a while, too long. Then he said, "My granddad worked timber in these hollows in the 50s. Whole crews of hard men, chainsaws, dozers, not a superstitious bone between them. They wouldn't cut past that bench. Company finally stopped asking why. You know what my granddad said when I asked why? He said, because that's where the woods starts watching back, and nobody wanted to be the one it recognized." Then he laughed, told me to padlock everything twice, and drove off. And I stood there in the July heat doing the math I very much did not want to do. The elk on its bench, ears pinned on the camera for 9 hours, that was below Saunders Bench, the logging grade where 2 people from 1987 smiled at my lens. That grade runs along the base of it. And the 3 cameras that got turned to face their trees, all in one impossible minute. They were the only 3 cameras in the entire grid with a sight line toward the bench. Every camera that could see that piece of ground had been turned away from it, politely, without breaking anything. Like someone drawing a curtain, or like something that had learned what the cameras were for, and had decided that, for whatever came next, it did not want to be on film. Number 4. The night count. August is when I stopped being able to pretend, and I want to walk you into it slowly, the way it walked into me. Because number 4 didn't come from one dramatic photo. It came from a spreadsheet. The scariest thing I have ever seen in my life is a spreadsheet. And I stand by that. Part of my job was data QC, quality control. Every card's photos got auto-tagged by species detection software, and I'd spot-check the tags. Deer tagged as deer, bears as bears. The software also flagged unknown detections, images where it saw a warm-blooded something but couldn't classify it. Every grid has unknowns. Blurry raccoons, half a deer, a wet branch. Our unknown rate all season had floated around 2% of detections, totally normal. First week of August, I ran the monthly QC report. Unknown rate, 11%. I assumed the software had updated and broken itself. It happens. So I did what a QC tech does. I opened the unknowns folder to eyeball them. 602 images, flagged across 19 cameras. I made coffee, put on my podcast, and started clicking. I want to describe the first hour honestly. It was boring. Branch, blur, moth, branch, half a possum, blur. The software wasn't broken. The forest had just been windy. I was actually relaxing. Around image 200, I stopped taking sips of the coffee. Around image 300, I turned the podcast off, because there was a shape that kept almost being there. Never centered, never lit. Always at the edge of frame, at the tree line, in the margin where the infrared flash dies into grain and noise. In one photo, it reads as a tall stump, except that camera sight has no stump. I'd stood on that ground 40 times. In another, it's a vertical shadow between 2 trunks that are, and I measured them against the survey data, 9 feet apart. A shadow that would have to be 9 feet from edge to edge if it were flat against them, or standing between them, much closer to the lens, and very narrow and very tall. In a third, there's what the flash catches when it hits an animal's eye, that bright retinal shine. Except it's a single point, not a pair, 12 feet up, where no branch crosses. One of those you dismiss. I had dozens. And they weren't random, which is the part the spreadsheet showed me and the part I can't unknow. I started logging every almost image, camera number, timestamp, which edge of the frame. Then I sorted by night and mapped them. August 2nd, flagged images on cameras 51, 49, and 46 in that order through the night. 3 cameras in a rough line, northeast corner of the grid, near the bench. August 5th, cameras 46, 40, 33. August 9th, 33, 28, 21, 17. Do you see it? Because I didn't at first. I was staring at columns of numbers at 2 in the morning, and then I plotted them on the grid map, and my hands went cold before my brain caught up. It was moving through the grid. Night after night, along the drainages, camera to camera, each night's line of almosts picking up where the last one ended. Never seen clearly, never centered. 600 images of a shape that understood exactly where the edge of every frame was and stayed on it. You cannot do that by accident. I couldn't do it on purpose. These cameras' detection zones are invisible. I installed them and I couldn't walk their margins without a diagram. Whatever this was had either watched me aim every single camera, or it could perceive the camera's fields of view directly, the way you and I see a flashlight beam. And its path had a direction, southwest, down out of the hollows below the bench, night by night, camera by camera, along the exact spine of the grid. I extended the line on the map with a pencil, and I remember my podcast app was still open on the table. And I remember the generator changing pitch outside, and I remember exactly what southwest of camera 17 was, because I slept there 3 nights a week. The line ended at the field station. I didn't sleep that night. Around 4 in the morning, I did the only proactive thing I'd done all season. I took our 2 spare cameras, and at dawn I mounted them on the station itself. One over the door, one on the generator shed facing the yard and the tree line. I told myself it was for the vandals, the kids. I wrote security supplement on the equipment log in handwriting I don't fully recognize as mine. For 6 nights, the station cameras saw nothing but me, moths, and one very confused skunk. The unknown rate across the grid dropped back toward 2%. The line of almosts stopped advancing. I began, God help me, I actually began to relax. And on the 7th morning, August 17th, I pulled the card from the camera over the door to clear it, mostly out of routine. 304 photos. 303 were me, moths, and the skunk. Photo 261 is timestamped 3:11 a.m. It's the yard. Empty. Moonless, flashlit, grainy. The picnic table, the fire ring, the first rank of trees. And centered in the frame, perfectly centered, the only perfectly centered image in this entire story, is the window of the station's main room. The window over the desk with the monitors where I sat every night, sorting. The window is dark because I was asleep in the back room. The glass is catching the infrared flash, and in the glass there is a reflection. Cameras photograph reflections all the time. The flash bounces off windows and you get a ghost image of the yard thrown back at you. I know what those look like. This is not that. The reflection in the glass is at the wrong angle to be anything in the yard, and it is not the yard. It's the ceiling of the main room, photographed from below, from inside, as if something were lying on the floor of my station, under the window, or standing in the middle of the room, bent all the way backward, looking straight up, and the glass caught it on the way. I know how that sounds. I've heard every counter. Double exposure, sensor ghosting, pareidolia in glass. I sent the raw file, anonymized, to a friend from undergrad who does forensic image analysis for a living. I told her it was from a wildlife study and asked only, is this frame manipulated, and what is the reflection? Her answer came back in 2 emails, 40 minutes apart. The first said the file was clean, no manipulation, no compositing, sensor noise consistent throughout. The second email, the 40 minutes later one, said this, and them quoting it in full. Ran the reflection geometry twice because I didn't like the answer. The angles only reconcile if the reflected surface is interior and the observation point is between 1 and 2 meters inside the room, roughly 2.4 meters above the floor. Also, and I want to be wrong about this, enhance the lower left of the reflection. There's a foreground element inside the room close to the glass. It reads as an occlusion of the ceiling, ovoid, with 2 specular points. What's actually in that building? Because the specular separation is about 10 centimeters, which on a human face would be about right for... She didn't finish the sentence. She just wrote, "Please tell me someone was standing inside at the window." Nobody was standing inside at the window. I was the only human within 9 miles. The doors were locked. Nothing on any camera approached the building all night. But at 3:11 a.m., something 2.5 meters tall was inside my station, in the dark, 1 room away from where I was sleeping, with its face close to the glass. Not looking out at the camera, looking up, at its own reflection, or at nothing. Or, and this is the version I believe because of what comes later, posing. Because it had finally figured out where the pictures I was collecting actually went, and it wanted to be in one. Just one, perfectly centered, like it was introducing itself. Number 5, the survey. I need to answer the question every one of you is yelling at your screen. Why didn't you quit? It's fair. It's the trail cam version of why don't they just leave the house? So let me give you the honest answer, and it's uglier than fear. It's that nothing had happened. Truly. Read back through everything I've told you and notice no injury, no damage beyond 3 politely rotated cameras. No threat you could write in a report. I had photographs, a strange elk, 2 hikers with an official explanation, a reflection my own expert couldn't finish a sentence about. And photographs are not events. My lease was gone, the job paid well, the season had 10 weeks left, and every morning the forest was green and loud and stunningly indifferent, and the whole thing felt like a story that had happened to someone else. Isolation doesn't just make you scared. It makes you doubt the version of you that got scared. Daylight me thought nighttime me was an embarrassment, and I'll tell you the real thing. The thing I've only ever said out loud once. Some part of me wanted the next card. Every folder was a slot machine. I'd feel dread on the hike out, and I'd feel the pull at the desk. And if you've ever kept scrolling something that was making you miserable at 2 in the morning, you know exactly the mechanism I mean. It knew how to be interesting. I've wondered since whether that was the whole point of the pacing. You don't trap an animal by chasing it. You bait the trail. You let it walk itself in. So, September. The study's funders wanted a terrain product, a proper elevation and habitat survey of the northeast sector to explain a population anomaly the data was showing. And the anomaly was real, by the way. It's on record. Since mid-July, wildlife detections in the cameras nearest Sanders Bench had fallen off a cliff. Not declined, stopped. Cameras that had been our busiest, Camera 17, the Elks Bench, were returning empty cards. No deer, no bears, no turkeys, no squirrels. If you know forests, that's the one that should raise your arm hair. There is no natural explanation for a hollow with no squirrels. Everything that could leave had. The university contracted a 2-man survey crew with a LiDAR drone. If you don't know LiDAR, it's a laser scanner. The drone flies a lawnmower pattern over the canopy, fires millions of laser pulses, and enough of them slip between leaves to map the actual ground underneath in centimeter detail. It sees through forest. It does not care about shadows or camera angles or the edge of frame. You cannot stand at the margin of a LiDAR scan. There is no margin. They flew the sector on September 9th and 10th. clear weather, textbook flights. I hosted them at the station. They were funny, competent guys who talked about fantasy football and did not know one thing about my summer, because by then I'd stopped telling anyone anything. They left, processed the data, and on September 19th, the lead surveyor called the station's sat phone. And I knew from his first sentence that his summer had just become like mine, because he skipped hello. He said, "The bench, Sanders Bench, that flat shelf on your northeast line. When was it logged?" I told him what the officer had told me. Never. The old company cut everything around it and wouldn't touch it. He was quiet for a second, and I could hear him clicking through something. Okay. Because the canopy's consistent with that. Old growth, no stumps, no skid roads. That's not the problem. The problem is under it. We've got structure returns on the bench, ground level and sub-canopy, regular geometry. And before you say cabin ruins, I've mapped 100 homestead sites. Foundations are squares. These are rings, concentric rings, 7 of them. Largest about 60 meters across, dead center of the bench. Stone or packed earth, maybe a meter high. That's still not the problem. Old rings, fine. Archaeology, cool. Someone writes a paper. The problem is the trees, man. I asked, what about the trees? The stems on that bench. Trunks show up in LiDAR as vertical returns, and normally they scatter random because trees grow where trees grow. Yours are on a grid, not roughly, to the centimeter. 300 plus mature trees, some of them 200 years old by the crowns, spaced in perfect radial lines off those rings, like spokes. Like somebody planted an orchard 2 centuries ago in the shape of a target. And I'm going to send you one more thing, and then, honestly, I'd like to invoice and be done with this contract. Frame grab from the drone's nav camera, second flight, 3:11 in the afternoon. The nav cam just films straight down for the pilot log. It's not the sensor. I've got one frame, dead over the center ring. He sent it. I still have it. It's a vertical shot through a gap in that impossible canopy, sunlit, sharp, and it shows the center of the innermost ring. The resolution isn't great. It's a nav camera, but it doesn't need to be. The center of the ring is not empty. There's a figure standing in it. Vertical, narrow, wrong. I'll say the height, and you can do with it what you want. Measured against the ring geometry, between 7 and 8 feet. And it is not looking up at the drone, which is what your eyes expect when you open the image, the way the elk should have looked at the camera, the way anything looks at a strange noise in the sky. It's facing outward. Northeast. No. I'm going to say it precisely because I put it on the map with a protractor like a crazy person. Bearing 215, southwest. Along the drainages, along the spine of the grid, along the line of almosts. It's facing the station. 9 miles away, straight through 60 square miles of ridge and hollow and rock, at the exact minute, 3:11, that its picture was being taken, from 400 feet in the air by a camera nobody could have known was there. It knew, whatever it is. It knew where every lens in that forest was pointing every second, including one moving at 30 miles an hour above the trees. It had spent a summer at the edge of my frames because it chose the edge, and it stood for the drone, dead center in its ring, in daylight, facing my home, because it was done choosing the edge. The margin phase was over. That frame wasn't a slip. It was an announcement. The surveyor filed his deliverables with a terrain report that mentioned unexplained understory structures, recommend archaeological consult, and did not mention the frame grab, and when I called his office in November, the number was disconnected. The university sat on the LiDAR data pending the consult, and Dana, the biologist, the ears never orient uphill woman, the only person who had seen pieces of this from the start, drove up on September 24th, looked at everything I had, all of it, the elk to the rings, in one sitting, in silence. Then she closed the laptop and said the most clarifying thing anyone said all year. I can't tell you what this is, but I can tell you what it's doing, because I watch animals do it for a living. It's a habituation curve. Distant contact, repeated neutral exposure, closer contact, controlled reveal. It's what we do when we're collaring wolves. You get the animal used to your presence in stages so that on the last day you can walk all the way up to it. Something is walking all the way up to you, and these photos are the stages. The only question I've got is what happens on its last day. We pulled my camp rotations that afternoon. No more overnights in the backcountry, day loops only. Dana pushed the university for an early season close, citing the wildlife collapse, and got a date. Final card pull and equipment retrieval, weather permitting, in the last week of October. I'd sleep at the station with both security cameras running, doors locked, truck fueled and turned around, nose out, every single night. 28 cameras were still deployed by then. I want you to remember I told you the grid started with 64. The turned cameras, the dead card cameras, a slow bleed of malfunctions all season. The forest had been dimming its own surveillance for months, and I'd filed every bit of it under maintenance. Which brings us to the last week of October. And camera number 17. Before I get to the sixth thing, I have to tell you about the weeks in between, because number 6 doesn't make sense without them. Call this an interlude. October, at the station, waiting out the season's last month alone. These aren't things I can't explain exactly. They're smaller than that. But they're the connective tissue, and 2 of them ended up mattering more than I could have known. The first was the archive project. With overnights canceled and half the grid dark, I suddenly had empty evenings, and I filled them the only way I knew how. I went back through everything. All 8 months, every card, every folder, from the March installs forward. Not spot checking this time, but frame by frame, with fresh eyes and a legal pad. Partly it was diligence. Mostly it was that sitting still in that building with nothing on the monitors had become physically difficult. That re-index is when I found 143B, the photo that shouldn't exist. I told you that already. But it found other things too. The bright smudge from the elk sequence, the 2 points 4 feet off the ground. It wasn't only in April. Once I knew its size and its habits, I found it in March, on camera 51, 3 days after installation, 11 days before I'd photographed a single bear. Low corner, tree line, 2 soft points. It was on camera 46 in early April, camera 40 in late April. Do you recognize those numbers? 51, 46, 40. The same cameras in the same order as the August night count. The southwest line, the path toward the station. It had walked that line before, months before. Slowly, invisibly, in the corners of frames I'd personally reviewed and passed. The August advance I'd caught in the spreadsheet wasn't the first approach. It was at least the second, which means the first one, March, April, ended somewhere, reached something. And whatever it reached, it liked enough to go back to the bench and start the walk again, patient as weather, this time letting itself be counted. I sat with my legal pad and worked out the arithmetic I least wanted. The first approach, March to April, at its rate of camera-to-camera drift, would have arrived in the station's hollow the second week of May. I went back to my own field notes from the second week of May. Tuesday. Generator fault? Ran fine at test, died 3 a.m., no fuel issue. Wednesday. Left window cracked? Don't remember doing that. Thursday, and I'm quoting my own handwriting verbatim from a season when I believed in nothing. Weird one. Woke at 3-ish, sure someone had said my name. Dreamed it. Too much coffee. Note, buy decaf. Buy decaf. I had slept through my own first contact and prescribed myself decaf. The second thing was the logbook. The Forest Service officer stopped by mid-October on one of his promised drive-bys. And I finally showed him, not everything, but the turned cameras, the timestamps, the survey rings. He sat with his hat in his hands for a long moment. Then he went out to his truck and came back with a photocopied stack, maybe 30 pages, in a manila folder soft with age. His grandfather's timber crew logbook, 1953 to 1957. He dug it out of a family box after our July conversation and hadn't decided whether to show me. Most of it is bored feet and weather and mule problems, but he'd flagged 4 pages with sticky notes, and I'm going to read you the entries as they're written, spelling and all, because I photographed every page and I look at them more than I should. March 4th, 55. Simmons' crew won't take the upper bench. Says the birds go quiet past the second creek and stay quiet. Docked him a day. He took the dock. March 19th. Found the marking paint moved. Not painted over, moved. Trees we blazed for cut are clean, and the blaze is on trees 40 yards uphill. Same marks, same paint. My own hand. Nobody owns up. Bad joke, bad for morale. April 2nd. Simmons quit outright today. Says he's seen the crew boss standing up at the bench at noon watching them work, and the crew boss was standing next to him when he seen it. I was the crew boss. I was at the landing all day. Paid him out full. Good worker. Didn't argue with him. April 11th. Wrote the company, recommending we finish the low hollows and leave the bench stand entire. Gave reasons. Grade, rot, access. Not the real reasons. The real reason is April 9th, and I have decided not to write down April 9th because a thing written down is a thing that can be read. And I've come to believe reading is not only done by men, it knows its name is in our mouths. I won't put it on paper, too. That's the last flagged entry. The cut moved south in May of 55, and the bench stands entire to this day in perfect radial rows that a LiDAR unit would eventually mistake for an orchard. 70 years apart, that man and I ran the same experiment and got the same result, and he understood the mechanism faster than I did, with no spreadsheet and no drone. It learns the instruments. Blaze paint, then. Cameras, now. Whatever we use to mark and watch and keep track, it studies the tool, and then it turns the tool around. A thing written down is a thing that can be read. He was warning me across 70 years about the exact thing humming on the desk in front of me. 64 things, bolted to trees, writing everything down. The third thing from those weeks is the smallest, and it's the one I'd take back if I could take back only one. It was late, October 22nd maybe, and I was on the SAT internet reading, of course, about the 1987 couple. An archived newspaper piece from the second week of the search, and there was a detail I'd never seen in the police file. A human detail. The kind that only ever survives in newsprint. The woman's mother talking to the reporter at the trailhead about why she was certain her daughter was alive out there. She said her daughter was the family photographer, never missed a shot, made everyone stop on every overlook, owned more film than clothes. And the mother said, this is the quote, I can close my eyes and see the column inches. Wherever she is, she's taking pictures. That girl never met a camera she didn't smile for. She'll come home with a full roll and a story. She never came home. But October 29th was 7 days out, and as it turns out, the full roll and the story came home instead. I just didn't know yet that I was the one carrying it. Number 6. The last card. The retrieval plan was simple and, on paper, safe. 4 days, 4 loops, daylight only, pulling cameras entirely, box, straps, everything, and hauling them out. Dana couldn't be there. She had a conference. The Forest Service officer knew my schedule and had promised drive-bys. October 26th, I pulled 9 cameras. 27th, 8, 28th, 7. And I remember that day as genuinely nice. Cold, blue, the leaves down enough that the woods felt honest, like they had nothing behind them. 22 hours from done, which left 4 cameras for October 29th. The Northeast Loop, camera 17. You already know the date. You've known it since number 2, the timestamp on the photo that shouldn't exist. 143B, the pointing man, the laughing woman. October 29th, 3:11 a.m. I want to be very clear that I knew it too. I had that date circled in red in my field notebook with a line under it, and I had made myself a promise out loud in the truck more than once. I will not be in the forest at night. 3:11 a.m. will find me locked in the station, lights on, awake, with the truck keys in my pocket. Whatever had been penciled into that timestamp, whatever appointment had been made without my consent, I would simply not attend. You can't ambush a man who stays home. I actually believed that. I thought its move was scheduled for 3:11 in the morning because that's what the photo said. It never occurred to me that the photo wasn't the appointment. It was the receipt, printed early. The 29th was gray, high overcast, dead still, that flat pewter light where nothing casts a shadow and noon looks like every other hour. I was on trail by 7. Cameras 21 and 28 came out clean by 10:30. Camera 33 was gone. Not damaged. Gone. Box unbolted, lag screws laid on a rock in a neat row like pulled teeth. And I stood there for a while doing arithmetic about daylight, and then I did the single stupidest cost-benefit analysis of my life. It was 12:40. Camera 17 was 90 minutes out. Sunset was 6:21. 3 hours of margin. I was 22 hours from never seeing this forest again, and if I skipped 17, some grad student would be sent for it in the spring, alone, knowing nothing. So I went, and I want to tell you what the walk-in was like, because it's the part people never believe. It was fine. That's the truth. No dread, no watched feeling, none of the pressure drop the horror channels teach you to expect. The woods were bare and gray and silent, but late October silent, dead leaf silent, a normal kind of nothing. I made good time. At 2:09 p.m. I came down onto the bench, and there was camera 17 on its tree, right where I'd bolted it in March. And everything, I want to be precise, every single thing about that clearing was ordinary. Except that the camera's status light was blinking. Mid-capture. Something had just triggered it. I turned around. The bench was empty. Let me say that first, cleanly, so you know I'm not building to a monster. I turned around and there was nothing there. Gray trees, gray light, my own boot prints coming in through the leaves. Whatever tripped the sensor was me, obviously, walking into frame. The light blinked, finished its right, went dark. Ordinary. And then I looked at my boot prints again, coming in through the leaves, one line of prints, mine, entering the clearing from the southwest, and a second line, coming in from the northeast, from up the bench. The same size as mine, the same tread as mine. I hunted that tread pattern across the clearing on my hands and knees. I laid my boot in the prints, and I will swear on anything you hand me, identical to the worn spot on the right heel. The second line of my boot prints walked down out of the northeast, crossed the clearing, and stopped, 6 feet in front of camera 17, facing it. 2 settled, deep, patient prints. The prints of someone who stood there a long time. There was no line walking away. I pulled that camera off the tree in under 4 minutes. Bolts, box, straps, everything into the back. And I did not run, because some very old part of my brainstem informed me that running would change the rules. But I walked out of that hollow like a man leaving a bank with something in his coat. And I did not stop, and I hit the truck at 5:12, and I was behind a locked station door before the light died. And then, because I am who I am, and because the drives were already boxed for transport, and because not looking was never once on the table for me all year, and we both know it, at 9:40 p.m. on October 29th, I put camera 17's final card into the reader. 311 photos. Yeah, I know. I checked the count 3 times. Photos 1 through 290 were March through October. Normal, then thinning, then the long dead stretch after July. Empty frames, the bench with no squirrels. I scrolled fast. Then photo 291, and I stopped scrolling. 291 is timestamped October 29th, 3:11 a.m. 11 hours before I got there. Infrared. The bench at night. And centered in frame, centered again like the station window, is me. This is where you came in. 9:40 p.m., the locked cabin, my hand on the mouse. Now you know everything I knew in that chair. The elk, the hikers, the turned cameras, the count, the rings. And I want you to feel the weight of the click the way I felt it. Me, not someone like me. I have spent 2 years with these photos, and there is no daylight in like. My face, my field jacket, my pack with the melted corner from the camp stove, my boots. Standing 6 feet from the lens at 3:11 in the morning at the moment I was. Verifiably, provably. I've checked the station cameras 1,000 times, and I am on them, asleep all night, 9 miles away in a locked building. The me in the photo is standing exactly where the boot print stopped, and the me in the photo is smiling. Not my smile. I told you at the start, the face is mine, and the smile is not mine. A reference smile, a learned smile, a photo smile. The way you smile when someone you love says, "Hold still." Photo 292, same timestamp, 3:11. The me in the frame has been joined. Standing on either side of him, close, companionable, hands at their sides like a family portrait. A man in a red flannel, a woman in a teal and purple windbreaker. All 3 of them smiling at the lens. All 3 centered, perfectly lit. The best photograph, technically speaking, that any camera in that grid produced all year. Photo 293 is the same composition, except the 3 of them have raised 1 arm each, and they are pointing, all together, all in agreement, like a tour group posing at a landmark, at the camera, at the viewer, at me, at the desk, at 9:40 p.m. Because who else was ever going to be sitting there when this card got read? It was never a photograph, it was addressed. Photos 294 through 310 I am not going to describe. I'm not being coy for the algorithm. I've described everything else, every frame, for 80 minutes. These I won't, and the reason is simple. Everything else in this story happened to the forest, or the cameras, or people who vanished before I was born. 294 through 310 are about what happens after. They are, as far as I can tell, an itinerary. Mine. And some of the frames have dates under them, and the dates haven't all happened yet, and you don't get to see your own itinerary over my shoulder. Trust me on this one single thing, which leaves photo 311. Photo 311 of 311 on the card from camera 17, pulled on October 29th. Timestamped, of course, 3:11 a.m. It's the bench, empty. No figures. Gray pre-dawn, the exact flat light I'd walk into 11 hours later. And low in the frame, arranged on the leaves in front of the camera, small and neat and unmistakable, the way the lag screws had been laid on that rock in a neat row like pulled teeth. My truck keys, my field notebook open to the page where October 29th is circled in red. And a bandana. I was in a locked room, 9 miles away, and my truck keys were in my pocket. I took them out and held them while I looked at the photograph of them. Both things were true at once. They have never stopped both being true at once. That's the last thing the grid ever showed me. Not a monster, not a face at a window. Just proof, patient, tidy, competent proof, that distance was a courtesy it had been extending, that it could reach the inside of my pockets, the inside of my station, the inside of a sealed evidence box from 1987 whenever it wished. It had spent 8 months teaching me its reach, one photograph at a time, on a habituation curve, exactly like Dana said. And on the last day of the curve, you can walk all the way up to the animal. The animal holds still for it. The animal has learned that nothing bad happens. I left at first light, and I never went back. So that's the 6. The elk, the hikers, the turned cameras, the night count, the survey. The last card. I owe you the ending. And the ending is that there isn't one. And I've decided that's the most honest thing about this story. I turned in the drives, most of the drives, finished my contract paperwork remotely, and moved 3 states away. The study was quietly rolled into a larger regional survey the following year. The Northeast sector was excluded from the new grid, officially for access and terrain limitations. The archaeological consult on the rings, as far as I can find, never happened. Dana left field biology for an agency desk job. We talk twice a year, and we talk about everything except one thing. The officer still works that district. When the grad students went in the next spring for the remaining equipment, they retrieved 22 cameras. Camera 17 was not among the ones unaccounted for. Camera 17 was in my pack when I left, and it's in a storage unit now in a town I don't live in a locked box, unplugged, no batteries, no card. And twice, once the first winter, once last spring, the storage company's system has emailed me an after-hours door access alert for my unit. And both times the timestamp was 3:11 a.m., and both times I drove out the next day and the lock was untouched and the box was where I left it. The second time, the box was facing the wall. I've had 2 years to decide what I believe, so I'll give it to you straight and you can take it apart in the comments. Genuinely, take it apart. I still read every rational explanation, hoping one of them will hold my weight. I don't think there's a creature in those hollows, not the way the channels mean it. Fur, claws, cryptid, a thing that could be hit by a truck. I think Sanders' bench is older than the categories I was trained in, and I think the loggers in the 50s had the only theory that ever fit the data. The woods start watching back, and for 80 years, maybe 800, watching was all it did, because watching was all anything did up there. Then we bolted 64 little watchers to its trees, aimed them down its trails, and taught it 2 weeks at a time, card by card, exactly what watching had become. It didn't haunt us, it studied us. It learned the camera the way it once learned the wolf and the chainsaw. It learned that we make images of the things we intend to keep track of. And then it made images of me. The couple from 1987 walked a route past that bench and were never found. And 39 years later, they are still there, unaged, posing, pointing. Kept, the way a photograph keeps you. I think that's what the itinerary frames are. I think that's what the smile that isn't my smile is. Somewhere on a card, in a locked box, in a storage unit, there is a version of me it is still developing. And the reason I finally recorded this, after 2 years of silence, name withheld, coordinates withheld, is the date I found penciled into my own field notebook last month. In the margin of a page I know was blank, in handwriting I do fully recognize as mine. It's this year. It's soon. And under the date, the same hand wrote a single sentence, and I've decided the sentence is the real reason you're hearing any of this, because I think it was meant to be passed along. I think it's the closest thing to a message it has ever sent, and I think it goes out to everyone who has ever strapped a camera to a tree and walked away feeling clever. Hold still. Stay out of the Northeast hollows. Good night.